Good afternoon and welcome to People Making Money, one of the Way to Wow shows. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and it is Wednesday, 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. We're here every week and we talk about how to find a career that you will enjoy and that will pay you well. Maybe even a career you'll love and then it'll pay you really well. As well as other issues related to investing, building wealth, all those kind of things. So last week, I talked about employment statistics and how you can use those to figure out what industry you may want to pursue and what opportunities there may be out there. So if you're currently thinking about some kind of career change, or maybe you're getting out of college soon and you're not sure really what you want to do. So I encourage you to take a look at last week's episode. Go to our YouTube channel. It's just youtube.com, I think, /@thewaytowowshow. Show. And you can find all of our shows for the last 3 years. And hopefully you will find information there that will help you on your professional journey. So today I'm going to talk about professional licenses. So I've talked about them a little bit before in terms of one of the fastest and easiest ways to start a business. So today I'm going to get down to more of the nitty-gritty. What are professional licenses? How do you get them? And the different fields that they're available for, all of that sort of information. So again, this is geared toward those of you who either are starting out on your professional career path, and or you're looking to make some kind of change. Maybe you're doing something now that for various reasons it's not working for you. I'll give you an example. Quite a number of years ago now, about 20 years ago, at a lunch at a friend's house, I met a young woman who was a teacher at a private school, and we started talking. And it was obvious pretty quickly that while she enjoyed teaching, what she was getting paid was just not working for her, especially living here in Los Angeles. No surprise, right? This is a high cost place to live. And so we started talking about real estate. And over the next few months, I connected her to some people I knew in real estate. She eventually went to work for one of them. Actually, it wasn't one of the people I referred her to be, completely transparent here. But through her networking with people, including the ones I introduced her to, she met a residential real estate agent who was very successful, served as an assistant for that agent while and in the meantime got her own real estate license. And now she's one of the top real estate agents in the system. She's in the Keller Williams system. And is she 100% happy? No, of course not. There's lots of challenges to being in the real estate business. She's always on call, and clients aren't always the happiest. Having said that, I think that overall she's a lot happier than she was when she was a teacher. So professional licensing was a path for her to move on to greater professional satisfaction, greater income earning potential. She has since bought some properties on her own account, so she's building up her own wealth. And overall, I think she enjoys her life and likes what she's doing quite a bit more than when she was a teacher. And I think that's true for a lot of us, coming out of high school or college or the military. We choose something based on what we think we can do without maybe knowing all of the options or looking into them. And then, we get into it and we start seeing what it's really about and realize, wow, this isn't really for me. I need to do something else. So while, startups, for example, are an absolutely viable path, and and there are many successful people who started a business, whether it's technology, whether it's in the medical field, whether it's food and beverage. All of those are terrific. That is a very different path. Whereas getting a professional license, it essentially means you're going to be some kind of service provider, okay? And in most, if not all of them, there's a pretty set way that people become successful within that field. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at today. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I want to, let's see, here we go. And no, that's not, this is of absolutely no use to us. Okay, so here we go. Now I'm going to be talking about specifically professional licenses in California because almost all professional licenses are issued by the individual states. And so how things work in California won't be exactly the same as the state in which you're living, although you will find a lot of similarities, okay? So California probably is a little more restrictive, and from what I found, it's much more expensive in terms of getting a professional license than other states like Texas, like Florida. But it will be representative of the kinds of fields and the kinds of professions that you can get into that you need a license to do. So I just want to take you kind of through this list here, and you'll see they start out with things like aerial tramways and amusement rides. So, I'm going to take, okay, these are not licenses for professions. So some of these licenses are the licenses you need to operate this kind of business. So if you're going to operate an aerial passenger tramway in California, probably in most states, you're going to need to have a license. Okay. And honestly, that's not really what I'm talking about. These kinds of licenses you need to operate a particular type of business. That's why I specified professional licenses. So not all of these are professional licenses. So here you go, animal services. Okay, now veterinary services, okay, that is a professional licensed job. And so you can see here a veterinarian, and you would have to get a veterinarian's license. You have to go to veterinarian school. That's pretty much a given. Now, veterinarian school is similar to medical school. The differences are there are fewer veterinarian schools, veterinary medical schools, and from what I've learned, they are probably actually harder to get into because of the limited number of slots than medical school. Okay, but I mean, if you really love animals, and there's a demand for veterinary services in where you live or where you want to live, so this could be an option for you. Now, I'll give you here's an example. In the Army, the Army is the last branch of the military, I believe, that still has veterinarians. And I believe they have veterinarian assistants in the Army as well. So if that's what you were doing in the Army, now you may be able to immediately get licensed based on that experience. Okay, so that would be something to look into. Now, I don't know what you have to do to be qualified to be a veterinarian in the Army. Perhaps you have to already have completed veterinarian school in the Army. But to be a veterinary assistant or a veterinary tech in the Army, again, don't know what that is, but it's something that if you want to continue on in that field, I would, encourage you to look into it. Okay, so let's look at some of these other ones. I'm not going to go through every single one here. So automotive services, athletics, so barbering and cosmetology. Okay, then people who cut hair, do nails, that kind of stuff, electrologists. Okay, these kinds of personal care services. I believe every state requires you to be licensed. Okay, and here's another great list of potential professions, and that is building, construction, contracting, engineering, etc. Okay, so Architecture. Now, I went to architecture school. I have what's called I have, well, not what's called, I have a 4-year degree in architecture. These days, most programs, you get what's called a Bachelor of Architecture, which is a 5-year program. It's a professional program. I have just a simple Bachelor of Science in Architecture. And the reason most programs have gone to being a Bachelor of Architecture is when you then go to get your architecture exam, you have to do less time before you qualify to sit for the exam. Okay, so you can become a licensed architect more quickly if you have a Bachelor of Architecture degree, or even more so, a Master's of Architecture degree. Okay, now for these other, whether it's construction activity, electrical, doing mechanical and equipment, so these all have their qualifications. Many of them involve doing some kind of apprenticeship. You may need to join a union in certain areas, or you may be beneficial to join a union in certain construction trades, because then the path to getting licensed and becoming a full-blown electrician or plumber or whatever is much more certain. Okay, but this is another great area to be licensed in. Okay, cemetery and funeral bureau. So if you want to become a funeral director or an embalmer, that's another possibility. Okay, education, charter schools, private post-secondary education, private schools, all of these are licensed professions. Now, to be a public school teacher, you have to be credentialed. And these days, even to be a primary school teacher, a lot of teachers have at least an undergraduate degree in education. Some have a master's. And at the high school level, gosh, I think all of my teachers, all of my daughter's teachers, unless they've been in the field for a long, long time, I think they all have an education degree, and I think most of them, if not all, have a master's in education. It just seems to be the direction that particular field is going. Okay, entertainment. So if you are going to be an entertainment agent, see a talent agent, okay, you need a license for that. Okay, so that's another possibility. Finance and accounting, okay, fiduciaries, okay, so for example, here we go. Okay, so here's the Professional Fiduciaries Bureau's website. This is one of the licenses that I hold. Okay, so if you want to, if you're interested in working with estates and trusts or guardianship, conservatorships, those kind of services where essentially you're taking care of other people or taking care of their finances or both. Okay, if you're going to do that for more than one person in California, then you need to have a professional fiduciary license. Now, this is one of those licenses where a lot of other states, you're actually not required to have a license to perform these services. Okay, I think roughly 25% or maybe a third of states require a professional fiduciary license. I will say that it appears that the current trend is more and more states requiring this type of license. And if you are considering going into this field, even if your state doesn't require the license, you might consider going through the educational program required to get the license so you can understand what are your responsibilities going to be, what is involved with being a fiduciary, what are the types of clients you'll deal with, what are some of the issues. So even if your state doesn't require a license for a particular profession, you may want to look into the professional education necessary in other states to get a license, because then that will help you become a more competent professional. Okay, so I'm going to go back here to this. Okay, so financial institutions and lenders. So if you want to deal with mortgage lending, so then you I mean real estate mortgage lending. Well, that's redundant. These days you have to have a license. It used to be all you need to have was a real estate license, but nowadays there's a separate one for lending, as opposed to things like brokerage and leasing and that sort of thing. Okay, healthcare and related services. So look, there's all kinds of them. acupuncture, behavioral sciences, psychology, psychiatry, chiropractic, dental hygiene, medical. Okay, medical cannabis. This has become a huge business here in California. Occupational therapy, optometry, pharmacy, physical therapy. So here's psychology. I guess that's different than behavioral sciences. Registered nursing, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're looking for a job where it's a growing industry, so healthcare and related services are a growing industry. Excuse me. As my generation, the baby boomers, continue to age, more and more healthcare services are necessary. Some of them, they don't pay particularly well, like home healthcare. Now, one of the reasons why something like home healthcare doesn't pay particularly well is you'll notice there is no license for home healthcare. Okay, so unless the home healthcare is being provided by a licensed professional, typically they're not making a whole lot of money. On the other hand, if you're a registered nurse or a vocational nurse who's doing home health care, because you have to have a license to do that home health care, so then you will get paid commensurate with the license that you have. Okay, same with something like respiratory care. There are home respiratory care practitioners where they go to the patient's home and take care of that. Same is true of occupational therapy. So I knew someone in sort of a past life who ran a home healthcare business, and one of the among the services she provided was occupational therapy and physical therapy. And her people got paid very well. So we're going back now, 30 years. And I think most of them back then were getting paid between $50 and $100 an hour. Okay. And then they got, I think, half that for travel time or something like that. So it was very, very lucrative practice for those professionals because they were licensed. And licensing means that you've had to pass. We'll get into this a little bit more because I'll go into one specific license, but you have educational requirements, you have experience requirements typically, et cetera. Okay. Now here we have, medical license. Well, that means you've gone to medical school. Okay. So obviously that's a very high standard. By the way, to become a registered nurse, you probably have gone to nursing school as well. Okay. So those are medical. A couple of others that I didn't know about until I started researching this topic. So horse racing, right? Horse racing, to be an authorized agent to represent people in buying and selling horses, to be a horse trainer, I guess to be a horse owner, maybe for racing purposes, I'm guessing, or something like that. There are licenses, okay? So that's something to look into. So legal services, okay? There's basically three: arbitration, attorney, court reporter, okay? So to become an attorney, you're going to go to law school these days. Well, technically, I think you can take the bar exam without having gone to law school. In order to have a reasonable chance of passing it, these days, people go to law school, okay? It's usually 3 years, can be. I think there are 4-year law school courses. That when I say 3 years, I think it doesn't necessarily take 3 years to complete it, but a regular law school program is a 3-year program. I think if you were to go to summer school, or you might be able to speed it up. Okay, court reporter. So there are court reporter schools that you go to learn to be a court reporter, because you have that little electronic thing you use now, and you have to learn to do that, and you have to learn all the rules of court reporting. It's a very complex job. These days, I've been hearing that court reporters are getting replaced by, they just record the whole proceeding, and then they use a program that takes that recording and turns it into a transcript. So if you're interested in court reporting, I would recommend that you look into the field and see what's happening in your state with respect to court reporters. Is it growing? Is it shrinking? And even if it's shrinking, though, also look at what is the average age in the field? Okay, my sense is that court reporters tend to be sort of older than the median age. And so although the field may be shrinking, more people may be leaving the field than the rate of shrinkage would justify. And so there still could be opportunity there. Okay. All right. I'm going to leave real estate for last and go to security. So security and investigative services. So if you want to be a private investigator, right? You want to be Marlowe, what is his name? Richard Marlowe? No, not Richard Marlowe. That's Richard Diamond. I can't think of Marlowe's first name, or Sam Spade, right? All the great, detectives from the detective fiction. But in all seriousness, you need to have a license to become a private investigator. There are schools you can go to. I think you can also work as an apprentice. Locksmiths, okay, they're also security guard. And in fact, if you're going to be a security guard, and if you're going to be an armed security guard, I should say, that's another license on top of that, okay? See private patrol operators, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these again. Now, for many of these, especially in the security fields, okay, you don't necessarily have to go to school. The particular company you work for may have a training program that they're going to put you through, but you probably will have to pass a background check. So I'm sure you can appreciate, to be a locksmith, which means you have the ability to pick locks, and you can carry, keys that, master keys and cut master keys and all of that. They're going to want to make sure that, you have the proper background to be able to do that. So if you have a criminal background of some kind, that may prevent you, or at least delay your ability to be able to get in that field until, perhaps that conviction falls off your record. Now, there's an important distinction there. Being charged is not being convicted. Okay, so in certain fields, even being charged needs to be disclosed, although that may not necessarily prevent you from getting the license. I'll talk about those licenses, some of those licenses in a minute. Okay, but in other fields, so what really matters is whether you've been convicted. Okay, so for sure, you have to disclose convictions. You'll see on license applications, it's typically going to ask that because they want to know your background, okay? But in some cases, you're also going to have to disclose whether you have charges pending against you, okay? Now, typically, you don't have to disclose that you've been charged and that the matter has been closed, and you were not you were not prosecuted, or you were prosecuted but found innocent. Other times you'll have to report that as well. So when you're dealing with these kinds of background issues, you need to be very clear about what it is you need to disclose on the application for the license. Here's why. Failure to disclose can be grounds for denial of the license, okay? So the mere fact that you didn't disclose something that wouldn't have prevented you from getting the license could prevent you from getting the license, okay? I'm going to say that again because it sounds a little weird. That you didn't disclose something that you did or that happened to you, that thing that you did or happened to you would not prevent you to get the license, but you failed to disclose it. The failure to disclose could be grounds for your not getting the license. Okay, so sometimes it's it's really just an issue if they want to know what's gone on in your past. If you had, let's say you got charged with fraud, okay, and they you didn't get charged for fraud. You got investigated for fraud. They ended up not charging you, and they closed the matter, and it was done. Okay, well, you may have to disclose that you were investigated for fraud. Okay, And the reason they want to know that is, did it only happen once? Okay, so then no big deal. Okay, but let's say you've been investigated for fraud 10 times, and all 10 times you weren't charged, but still you've been investigated 10 times. They're going to look at that differently. Okay, more to the point, if you were investigated for fraud 10 times and didn't disclose it, can you see how that might look like you're hiding something? Okay, so these are the kinds of issues you need to be aware of when you apply for these licenses. Okay, I'm going to go back to this second to last category here, real estate. Okay, this is something I'm very familiar with because I currently hold and have held several real estate licenses in my career. So in order to sell or rent or lease real estate, manage real estate, or appraise real estate, you're going to need one or more licenses. Okay, so to sell real estate and to sell, rent, lease real estate, and to manage real estate, you need to have either a salesperson's license or a real estate broker's license. And to appraise real estate, you need a real estate appraiser's license. Now, I can tell you the real estate appraiser's license is required in every single state because as a result of a law called FIRREA, the Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, and Enforcement Act, which I believe was passed in 1989. Okay, so a while ago, states were required to license real estate appraisers who are going to be doing what are called federally related transactions. A federally related transaction is a loan that is either guaranteed by the federal government. So, for example, a VA loan is guaranteed or is insured by the federal government, like an FHA loan, or is going to be going to a federal government agency like Ginnie Mae, the Government National Mortgage Association, or another organization that may not actually be a department of the federal government, but it's connected to it, like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Or it's being made by an institution that is insured by the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or is chartered by the federal government. All of these things create what's called a federally related transaction, and therefore any appraisal done on real estate done for the review and underwriting of that transaction has to be done by a licensed appraiser. Okay, now if you were going to do work for a lawyer on an estate matter, that actually you don't have to be licensed to do that. Having said that, these days, because most real estate appraisers are licensed, if you're going to do a real estate appraisal for a lawyer and you're not licensed, you could end up in court defending yourself against a licensed appraiser. And that licensed appraiser is going to say, well, I hold a certified general real estate license from, 5 states. And, this is what you have to do to get them and blah, 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 blah. And then I have X amount of experience on top of that. And you're going to be left saying, well, I have X amount of years of experience. Okay. And for people who don't, who maybe don't know exactly how the business works, they would tend to think that the licensed appraiser is more qualified. Now, by the way, that's not necessarily the case, but how it's presented could make it sound like it. Okay. So that's how a real estate appraiser's license works. Okay. I'm not going to talk about appraisal management companies. That's not a licensed profession per se. That's a company. Okay, so I'm gonna click through here to the Department of Real Estate, the California Department of Real Estate's website, and so you can see here. Here's all these different forms. Okay, so if you want to be, typically you're going to start out as a licensed salesperson. Okay. And the reason that's the case is because in a state like California, in order to qualify to be a real estate broker, where you can work on your own without supervision, you need to have a minimum number of years of experience and of recent experience. See, so let me give you an example. I was a real estate broker for almost 20 years before I joined the Navy, a licensed real estate broker here in California. And the reason I was able to become a licensed real estate, the reason I became a licensed real estate broker was because at the time, in order to qualify to take the broker's license exam, all I had to do was have a 4-year college degree in any subject at all. It didn't have to be related to real estate, and then take 8 classes that were real estate related. Things like real estate principles, real estate practice, real estate finance, legal issues related to real estate, and a few others. Okay, I think there were 5 required ones and 3 electives. Okay, and then I was able to take the broker's exam, and I passed, and so I was a licensed real estate broker. Okay, then I joined the Navy, and I was out of the real estate business for the next I think about 15 or 16 years or so, somewhere in that area. Okay, so then when I went back to get a real estate license again, although I had been licensed for 20 years, because I had had a period of not being licensed for more than 4 years, I had to apply to get licensed again and take the exam again. And to get a broker's license, the requirements had changed. So now to get a broker's license in California, and here, let's see if we can click this through here. Nope, it's not on this thing. Okay, so to get a broker's license in California now, you either have to have, I believe it's 5 years of current experience in the real estate business, or you have to have a degree related to the real estate business. And well, actually, I may be wrong on that second thing. Hey, let's look here. Here we go. Current processing time. Wait. Okay, e-licensing. Oh no, this is the verification. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on this because it's also going to vary from state to state. But in any event, because I didn't have current experience, and the degree that I have, the fact that I have a college degree and in fact a couple of master's degrees now, that wasn't enough to qualify me to take the broker's license. So I took the salesperson's license exam. Okay, and interestingly enough, when I passed the exam and applied for the license and got my license, it's the same license number I had before. Okay, so they didn't give me a new license. It's the same license number, but now it's for a sales license, and it'll be another, whatever it is, 4 or 5 years until I can become a licensed broker and work without supervision. And that is the difference between being a licensed salesperson and a licensed broker. A licensed salesperson, in order to do work in the real estate business that requires a license, needs to be affiliated with a broker. And that broker has the responsibility for overseeing the salesperson's activities to make sure they're handling things in the proper way. Okay? So they're going to make sure that you're doing things ethically, legally, ethically correct, legally correct. And they're also going to teach you the business. Now, some companies are better at that than others. That's a separate issue from getting your professional license. But generally speaking, the first step to getting involved in real estate is getting your license, because you can't talk to potential customers until you're actually licensed. And this is another thing to bring up here is typically to get a professional license, you're going to have to pass an exam. Merely passing the exam does not give you the right to conduct business. Passing the exam is step 1. Step 2 is applying for the license and paying the license fee. And until your license is actually issued, you cannot work in that licensed capacity. Okay, so normally you're going to be paying two fees, at least two fees. One is the exam fee, and the second is the license fee. Okay, now there may be others. For example, to get a real estate license, you have to submit fingerprints so that you can be run through the Department of Justice, I believe at both the state and federal level. They want to know what convictions you have. So typically there's also a fee associated with having your fingerprints done. And by the way, that's not uncommon. Lots and lots of licenses require you to submit fingerprints. These days it's done electronically. Like in the old days, you took this fingerprint card and they had like if you what you see in the old movies, they would roll your finger onto the, you stamp it on the black ink pad and then they roll it onto the card and all that kind of stuff. Nowadays they don't do that. In fact, they don't even do the clear stuff that turns black when you touch the paper. Nowadays, there's a scanner basically, and your fingerprints are scanned on a scanner and they come up on a computer screen and they're submitted electronically. So it's a lot cleaner system. Although, as I recall, make sure your fingers are, not dry, because it makes the machine doesn't sense them as well. So although the person who's doing the fingerprints for you, they'll have something there to moisturize your fingers if necessary. Okay. But I know the first time I did that, it's like she kept going like this, and I wasn't taking. She's like, yeah, you need to moisturize your fingertips. So she gave me some moisturizer and did it. And then, after that, I've had it done, I think 2 or 3 times now for various licenses. So in any event, that is the typical process. So I'm going to review that again, because although I'm talking about real estate licenses in this case, it's very similar for a lot of other licenses. Insurance licenses, the appraisal license, certainly, real estate licenses, and then we're going to go on and in a few minutes and talk about security licenses. It all works pretty much the same way. Now, in some cases, you have to have something like a college degree, although typically for entry level, that's not required at all, okay? But you are going to have to do some kind of education. So for the salesperson's license, you need to have 3 classes, okay? Real estate, in California, it's real estate principles, and then I think there's a list of what the other ones can be. And they include the things I mentioned before, things like real estate practice, legal issues, ethics and standards is almost always going to be a required class. Okay, so you take the education, and once you have your verification of completion of the education, then you submit your application to take the license exam. And most of this is done online. So you'll notice here PDF fill-in. So if we were to go to these different licenses here in this column, it's a PDF fill-in. Okay, this one is a PDF print only. So for the broker's license and salesperson's license, you actually have to print the PDF out. I guess that's how it works. In others, you can do the whole thing online. Okay. By the way, here's live scan for the fingerprinting. Here's fingerprint information, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Okay. So you fill out the license exam application. You submit that. You get approved. Hopefully you get approved for the exam, right? They're going to make sure that, in fact, your educational stuff checks out. Okay. And then you'll get a letter approving you for the exam. In some cases, they'll give you an actual exam date and a location you have to go to. I know that's how it works in California for the real estate exam. In other cases, you get an approval to take the exam with a window, and you get the information on where you call or where you go online to schedule it. And you go ahead and schedule it online, or you call them and schedule it. And in some cases, you'll go to an exam test center. In other cases, you can take it online. If you are going to take an exam online, I do recommend you talk to people who have already done that. I know when I took my life insurance exam, although I could have taken it online, The fellow I had from doing my training course recommended not doing it because he said, oftentimes the system doesn't work properly. And so you end up not being able to complete the exam, and then you end up having to go in anyway. So in my case, I just went ahead and went in. Okay. Now, in many cases, though not all, after you complete the exam, you will get the results before you leave the test center. Okay. So I'm trying to remember with respect to the real estate exam. Yes, I did get my results. Now, the way it typically works, and again, this varies from state to state and exam to exam, is if you pass, all you find out is you passed. Okay, so you don't get your score. So let's say minimum score to pass is 70%. So if you passed, all you know is you got at least 70%. If you fail, then they'll give you your score. So if you got 69%, you'll get a fail notice and it'll say you only got 69% of them right. And then in some cases, they will tell you how you did on certain topics. So you can see, well, which topics did I do well in and which topics did I do poorly in? Okay, and that'll help you to study in order to take the exam again. Now, one of the licenses where they tell you your score no matter what is the life insurance exam. Okay, so in that case, I got my results, and it right after I finished taking the exam, and it gave me my score, even my passing score. So I knew how well I did. But that's the only, as I recall, that's the only exam where I knew what my passing score was. All the other ones I've taken, all I knew was that I passed. Okay. And so, don't be surprised. I know it's a little frustrating, especially if you're like me and I want to know my passing score. It's like, just deal with it and move on with your day. Okay. So then once you've gotten you've passed your exam. Okay. Then again, depending on the license, you may have to submit an application for the license. This is different than the application to take the exam. It just depends. Okay. For my professional fiduciaries license, okay, I submitted the license application up front, and they reviewed it and before they would let me take the exam. And then once I took the exam, the Bureau got the results and they processed my application after that without me having to submit further paperwork. And I think they also collected all the fees up front, if I remember correctly. In the case of a real estate license, after you pass the exam, you have to submit your license application with the license fee itself, and then they process it in order to get your exam. Now, by the way, when I applied for my real estate license, I submitted all my stuff, and I waited and I waited and I waited, and I never heard anything. And so finally, I called the DRE, and I got a fellow on the phone, and I explained to him that I've been waiting at that point for several months, and it was sort of beyond what they say was the typical time it takes for them to decide about a license application. And he looked into it. Super nice, helpful guy, I will say. And kudos to him. If I could remember his name, I would say it, because he really kind of stuck with it. What he eventually found was they had input my credit card number wrong. So they thought, and what the reject came, and I didn't know it had been rejected, but they rejected my application, but then didn't inform me. And when he looked it up, he said, "Oh, well, your credit card isn't any good." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, can I give you my credit card number now?" He said, "Sure." So I gave him the number. He says, "Well, that's the number we got here." So evidently whoever keyed it into the system or whatever, when they tried to charge it, had done it wrong. So he said, "You know what?" He said, this has been such a hassle for you. Hang on, let me see if I can get this resolved while you're on the phone. And he called around. It took him about 15 minutes, but at the end of the 15 minutes, he said, okay, I got it solved. He said, your license should be popping on the system in just a few minutes. And sure enough, before we got off the call, there it was. Because it's all done electronically now. They don't even send you the license certificate like they used to do in the old days. So sometimes you do have to follow up, okay? Track it online, track the times that it takes, that there's the processing times, okay? Because weird things happen. And look, I think he expected me to be all, mad at him or whatever, because he was like, Constable, I said, you know what? You don't need to apologize to me. I said, make it an easy day for yourself. There is no reason for me to be angry or upset. It's not as if you caused this to happen. These things happen. And here's the interesting thing. I pass this along because I understand it can be frustrating dealing with, government officials and such. Look, in 95% of cases, maybe more, the person you're talking to on the phone has nothing to do with what went awry with your situation. They're just there to try and, help you out. If you're yelling at them, what is their incentive to do so? In my case, by treating this fellow, decently, so he actually was supposed to have been done working before he was able to solve my problem. And he had told me, he said, well, if hopefully we can get this solved because I'm supposed to go off duty at such and such a time. So maybe, by the way, it's better I don't mention his name publicly because maybe it could get him in trouble. So it was, I think it was supposed to be done at 4 o'clock or something in the afternoon. So he wasn't done at 4 o'clock. So I said, hey, do I need to call you back or do you need to call back? He said, you know what? Look, just hang on. Let me get this finished for you. Because if you have to call back, you may have to start all over again. What a pain that is. And so he took time. It was his own time. I mean, maybe he got compensated overtime, but I don't think so. Not from how he explained it to me. He just took his own time to get it finished. And I think it was in large part because I think a lot of people probably yell at him when they're not getting what they want. And I told him flat out, it would be inappropriate for me to do that. You're trying to help me. I recognize that, so if we can work together calmly, that's the best way, and take your time and don't sweat. I don't want to be the customer that you're going out later to complain about to your colleagues, So I do recommend you take that, attitude when you're dealing with, getting your licenses, because it can be frustrating and it's frustrating for you, but it can also be frustrating for the people you're dealing with, especially like the California Department of Real Estate. It's a large department. There's a lot of people working there, and not everyone working there knows the system well. I happened to get someone who did know the system well, and so he was able to figure it out. And in fact, the person who had originally processed my applications was somebody new, didn't know, all the sort of ins and outs. And so it just, it didn't get handled properly. What are you going to do? That's life. Okay. So that's the process. And then once the license is actually approved and issued, now you can do business. Or in the case of a real estate salesperson, now you could affiliate with a broker and start doing business. Okay. And like I said, most of these licenses nowadays, you just go on to a website for the issuer and you download your license. They don't send you paper licenses. I know when I got my first real estate license, it was a piece of paper about this big. And I remember when I got my first real estate license, it was like this 8 by 10 or 8.5 by 11 inch certificate on kind of thick paper. And I was like, wow, this is kind of impressive. I'm assuming they don't do that anymore because, it costs them money to mail and it's extra labor and all that kind of stuff. And fine, you get it a lot more quickly when you can just go on the website and download it. Okay. And let me show you this. So in California, there is this e-licensing system. So like I can sign on to my e-licensing account and I can get all the information I need about my license history. I could download another copy of my license if I needed it. If I need to renew it, I can do it through the e-licensing system. And lots of states have these kind of systems now. And I don't doubt that if there are some that don't currently have them, they're going to have them in the near future. So that makes it really easy to, or well, it doesn't make it easy, but it makes it easier to do than in the days when you had to mail stuff and there was paper and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So I want to go to one more thing here. So some licenses are issued essentially on a national level. Okay. The most common ones are securities licenses. This is a list of FINRA codes related to qualification examinations. And it depends what you're going to do. Okay. So I'm going to go down here to, okay. So here's a Series 6. This is a pretty common license to get. And it's for investment company and variable contracts products representatives. Let me explain what that is. Let's say you're going to sell something other than term life insurance. And I'm not getting into whether you should or you shouldn't. There's lots of people who say, you know, like whole life and all of that is a bad investment. But nonetheless, if you are going to sell those kind of products, you need to have not only an insurance license in most states, if not all, but a securities license as well. In this case, a Series 6. Okay. Now, if you have a Series 6, you only need one, even if you're licensed in 10 states. Okay. The Series 6 covers all 50 United States. However, certain states, like California, require you to also have a Series 63 in order to sell those products. Oh my gosh, she's Series everywhere. Some states require you to also have a Series 63 in addition to a Series 6 before you're fully licensed to perform those activities. Okay. So to sell things like variable annuities, to sell mutual funds, to sell variable insurance products, all of those require you to have, I lost it here. Where's the Series 6? A Series 6 to be an investment company and variable contracts product representative, and a Series 63. Okay. Those are both required. Now, if you were, where is it? If you're not a 27, where's the 26? Okay. Okay. Now, if you're going to supervise or train people who are doing that, you'll need to have a Series 26. Okay. Investment company products, variable contracts principal. Okay. That's someone who is basically they can supervise and train people who hold a Series 6 and 63 licenses. Okay. And you see these designation here, an IR, an IP. I think this was what, an AG up here for the Series 60. Yeah, an AG. Okay. Now, these are not like certifications. FINRA is not attesting to your competence or skill or anything like that. Like all of the professional licenses, they're just saying you pass an exam, you fulfilled the qualifications in order to conduct this activity, and that's it. Okay, so you're not like I'm not like a FINRA certified, investment company products, variable contracts principal. No, I'm not. I'm just registered as an IP. Okay. And there's lots of others. Now, you may have heard of a Series 7, I think. Okay, this is a general securities representative. This allows you to be what we used to call a stockbroker. Okay, you can sell individual securities. Okay, whereas with a Series 6, you cannot sell individual stocks. Okay, and there. Okay, so then there's the. Okay, so here's the 65 investment advisor representative. So if you were going to sell wealth management services, okay, where somebody has a certain amount of money that's being handled for them, maybe they have $1 million and it's going into a wealth management program. So then you would need a Series 65 or Series 66. Okay, this is also a state-by-state license. Okay, so depending on where you're conducting your business and how and what it entails, you may have to pass. Well, not that you have to pass the 65 in each state. It's just that once you pass the 65, or for that matter, the 63, okay, then you have to apply for licensing in the individual states in which you want to practice. Again, depending on what it is you're going to be doing. There are certain exceptions that may allow you to practice in a state without being licensed. They're very, very narrow. And these are, you have to know these specifically, because if you get caught practicing without being properly licensed, not only will you not be allowed to practice, but you also may not be allowed to go back and get the proper license so you can practice legally. Okay, so you don't want to be caught in a situation where you should have had a particular securities license, you didn't get it, and now you're barred, at least for a period of time, from being able to get licensed and being able to practice. Okay, now I want to go to one other thing here. So NASA is the North American Securities Administrative Association or something like that. Anyway, this is the organization that actually deals with the 63 exam and the 65 exam, these exams that are required by a state. Okay, so an exam, a securities exam, could be done by FINRA, which is the national organization, or it could be done by NASA, which is the state organization. Okay, they're two different organizations. A lot of the material is similar. Okay, but there are differences. And not every state requires a NASA exam, but if you're going to be dealing with securities, you're going to have to pass some kind of FINRA exam, okay? And it's the same kind of process. So typically, you'll have to take some kind of education to qualify for these exams. And even if you don't have to take education to qualify, you're probably going to want to take some kind of review course. I know I took the I can't think of what they're called. Anyway, there's one of the exam prep companies. That's who I use. You probably are going to want to take that, especially if you're not particularly familiar with the information. Then you're going to submit to get approved to take the exam. Okay, you get approved, take the exam. You get an exam window. It's usually 90 days to take that exam. You go to a test center, although you can take them online. I've always gone to the test center. You take the exam, you'll be informed right then and there whether you passed or not. Okay, and assuming you pass, then that information will get transmitted to either FINRA or NASA, and they will finish processing your license, and then you will be notified. Until you're notified that your license has been issued, okay, you cannot practice. You can do administrative duties that don't require a license in an office, where those activities are going on, but you cannot do licensed activity until you have the license. Okay, please remember that. Passing the exam does not qualify you to practice. That's true of all of these professional licenses. So that's what I have for you today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the screen sharing. If you have questions about specific licenses and you're not sure how to get started, my contact information will be in the show notes after the show posts on my on our YouTube channel. And again, you can always contact me if you're watching this on social media. Just post a social media comment to it. I'll be happy to help guide you. It's really, honestly, my pleasure to help someone get started on a new career. And the reality is I've done this a lot, so I may be able to cut through it more quickly than you can. I'm happy to kind of point you in the right direction and get you on your way more quickly. So thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. I do want to mention I have 3 shows now. On Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time is my show, Trusts and Estates Weekly. If working with trusts and estates and taking care of people's needs with respect to those kinds of matters is something that might enhance your business, I encourage you to tune in for that show. It's a half-hour show, and we talk about all kinds of different issues. And we're starting off with some basic ones. We're going to be diving deeper and deeper and deeper. I'm scheduling some expert guests to come on as well. And so you can go to Eventbrite and you can join us live in the meeting and ask them questions or ask me questions. On Tuesdays is business lessons from the military. And this is also a half-hour show. It starts at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we talk about military doctrine, history, and great leaders, and how we can learn from that and apply it to our business lives. Right now, I'm looking at Marine Corps warfighting doctrine and how you can take this doctrine, refashion it, and apply it to, speeding up your success and advancing with you in your business life, whether it's a business you own or whether it's a business that you work for. And then today, Wednesdays, this is People Making Money, and you've seen what this is about. So thank you very much for joining me. I hope to see you next week. And if you've missed any of the episodes and want to go see back ones, do consider going to our YouTube channel and do consider subscribing. And that way you'll always be notified when there's a new episode out there. So I wish you a very good afternoon. And since I won't see you before then, a wonderful restorative weekend. Thanks so much for joining me. And Marie, darling, out there in heaven, you are my belle. All the best.